in the century in which he lives, which is that he is killed by his soldiers. He's replaced by someone named Macrinus, who, in addition to having another one of those great names in history, Macrinus is also the first emperor to come from the equestrian class, not from the senatorial class. So he's kind of the he's like the lower end of the patrician class. He rules for about a year, and then he is also killed by his soldiers and replaced by someone named, best name of all, Elagabalus. Elagabalus' name is a really weird corruption of Elgabal, who is the Syrian sun god. Elgabalus is named such because he was a priest of the sun god in Syria. He's also 14, and according to M. Carey, that historian I read, surpassed all the other Caesars in good looks, but had little else to recommend him. So he's really pretty. Allegedly, he wears makeup and things to make this even more apparent. More importantly, he tries to change the government in Rome itself from the traditional Roman gods to the Syriac sun god, and he's not a very effective emperor because he's, a teenager. So he is also killed by his soldiers in 222. So, good night. This time, so this other characteristic of the Severan dynasty is that there are a lot of powerful women behind the throne. So the woman who got Elagabalus to power is his grandmother, whose name is Julia Misa. And when she sees that Elagabalus didn't do so well, her daughter, Julia Mamaea, all women in Roman history are named Julia. Julia Mamaea, these are not, by the way, first. So the Roman name, this is not going to interest you, but I'm intending it anyway. The Roman name is three parts. There's the praenomen, the nomen, and the cognomen. The praenomen is the first name, the cognomen is the last name. The nomen is like a clan name. So, for example, my family's clan in Scotland is the Gunn clan, so my name would be Keith Gunn Jameson, as opposed to my actual name, which is Keith Michael Jameson, which is better. So a lot of Roman women didn't have praenomens, they didn't have first names, they only had clan names and last names. So Julia Mamaea doesn't mean her first name was Julia, it means that her clan name was of the Julian clan, as was Julius Caesar, his name was Gaius Julius Caesar, Gaius being his first name. So it's really sexist and awful, but now you know. So that happens in 222. 222, Alexander Severus comes to the throne, and surprisingly, manages not to be killed immediately, because his mother, Julia Mamaea, is a pretty competent administrator. One of the history books I read suggested that the things that she chooses to do during her rule are the result of her being a woman. She tends not to invade people and instead, restock funds in the treasury and give free bread to people and be kind and mothering. And so the historian was like, well, of course a woman would do that. So, I don't know, women are better administrators is, I guess, what the guy's getting at. So Severus manages to rule for a couple of years. He's a pretty good emperor. His problem is that he's not very good at fighting things. So in the 230s, the new Sassanid guy, the new Sassanid ruler, whose name is Shapur I. This is another one of the funny antagonists of our story. He begins the first of what will be 6 or 7 invasions of Roman territory. And Severus manages to beat him, but he doesn't do it very well. So the troops now know that Severus is not a man's man, an effective commander of Roman armies. So when this is the German tribe, the Alemanni invade in 235, the Alemanni invade Germania Inferior, so southern Germany. Or no, that would be Germania Superior, wouldn't it? They invade northern Germany. It's like here. They invade. Alexander decides to enter into negotiations with them whereby he will buy them off. The troops have finally had enough, so one of his legions, specifically the 22nd Legion Primigenia in Mainz, where Alexander is staying, decides to revolt and murder him and his mother, and proclaim their own guy, whose name is, I love these names, Maximinus Thrax. They proclaim Maximinus Thrax emperor in 235. This is usually considered the beginning of the actual crisis of the 3rd century. because after Alexander is murdered, things kind of go all to hell, as we will see. So Maximinus Thrax has two characteristics. One, he is enormous. He is a very big man. He's like Andre the Giant, only Roman and an emperor. So he's huge. His other characteristic is that he's great at fighting and not much else. So, yep.
Is he huge for our century, or is he huge for their century? Like, is he just like 5'10" and like, 150
Roman
pounds, or is he
This
like
is a good question.
7'5"?
The sources describe him as being 8 feet tall. This is probably not true, but we don't know how big he actually was. His face, if you look at it on coins, is kind of weird. Like his nose is really huge. They think that he might have had that disease where you don't stop growing. Yeah, there. So he may have actually been really big even by our standards. It is a good point, however, to note that everyone in the 3rd century was about 3 feet tall. So, Maximinus Thrax spends 3 years, which is his entire reign. Spoiler alert, he is killed. Didn't know if you would see that one coming. So he spends the 3 years of his reign fighting off barbarians in northern Germany. The irony here is that he is actually a barbarian himself, or at least not Roman. The Thrax in his name means Thracian, rather than the villain in Osmosis Jones. And so he was probably Thracio-Roman, meaning the descendant of Thracian tribes that adopted Latin and became all Roman-y. So he's from like here. He's the first emperor never to set foot in Rome, not one time. The one time that he even considers going there is when he's trying to retake the city after it revolts against him, once again, spoiler alert. So in 238, we have my favorite of all civil wars, the Year of the Six Emperors, which you may have seen coming. In March 238, the governor of Africa, Proconsularis, who's a fellow named Gordian. There are going to be 3 of these, so keep your eyes open. Gordians, I mean. Gordian I is declared emperor, but Gordian I is well into his late 70s. People in Africa, Proconsularis, are pissed because Maximinus just instituted a new tax, as he is fond of doing, in order to have enough money to kill people. So Gordian, who is the governor, is proclaimed emperor. The Senate accepts him because he is of the senatorial class. They like him. They like the cut of his jib. And because he is so old, his son, Gordian II, is also declared emperor. So things look to be going really well for a little bit of a second. Then the governor of Numidia, who is loyal to Maximinus, attacks them. And so Gordian's army consists of peasants with pitchforks, and the governor of Numidia's army consists of soldiers with swords. So he is dispatched relatively rapidly. Gordian I then commits suicide, so they're out of the picture. Meanwhile, however, Maximinus' troops have already killed him because they think that these guys are emperor now. So then there is no emperor. The Senate responds to this problem by naming 2 of its own members emperor. Marcus Claudius Pupienus, who is once again a hale and hearty 73, and his younger colleague, Decius Caelius Balbinus. I'm sorry, actually, Balbinus is the one who's 73. Pupienus is a near 60. So they are proclaimed co-emperors. They don't get along, so once again we have a situation where they're living in palaces on opposite ends of the city. And in addition, everyone is really upset about the Gordians dying because they thought they were cool, so they force Pupienus and Balbinus to declare Gordian II's son emperor as Gordian III. The Praetorian Guard then kills Pupienus and Balbinus. So the dust clears after about 3 months, and Gordian III is emperor. In the great Roman tradition, he is about 16. So, whoops. However, Gordian III does have one thing going with him, which is that his father-in-law, whose name is Timesitheus, I want to say, or something, is a really cool guy. He's Praetorian prefect now. So Timesitheus basically rules the empire in Gordian III's name, and things go very well until 243, What happens in 243 is that Titus Thestius dies of natural causes, and Gordian III, who is at this point maybe 21 or